Hey guys, welcome to another Code with Jason Meetup. Thanks for coming. Tonight we're going to do another code review, this time with a new code reviewer. We've had a couple repeat guests doing code review multiple times, but we have a new code base this time, and our volunteer is Matt Berg. So Matt, thanks for having us look at your code. Thanks for sharing your code. And I'll turn it over to you for anything you want to say about it.
All right. Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having us on or me on. And yeah, excited to dive in today. My name is Matt Berg, and I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Somni. So we're a digital health company that is focused on sleep health. We offer basically a structured 10-week intervention that's adaptive and personalized to help an individual make material changes to their sleep without, drugs or side effects, really to address things like insomnia and shift work disorder. And today, I would love to share sort of a feature that's in build right now, or sort of a sort of in-flight sort of thing that we're working on around sleep tracking using wearables. So integrating with basically an API for a bunch of wearables, and how we're thinking about it and how we're trying to get it right. So thinking about it right now, and then so that it hopefully over the long term, it works the way we need it to. So.
Okay, great. And so in advance of this, you had sent me like 4 files. Is there anything that you want to look at first?
The only thing I might do, it might be helpful to give some context to folks who are on the call, is just do like a quick screen share of maybe like what we do. And then it might give some more context to before we look at the code in terms of the feature, what we're trying to sort of go for. But that's, up to you. We could dive right in, but if it's helpful, I could spend like 1 minute just quickly overviewing the product and the feature we're working on.
Yeah, that's great. I just changed the settings, so you should have the ability to share now.
Awesome. Let me do that really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Okay, I still cannot on my end. There we go. Now I can.
Awesome. Well, great. So this is just the landing page, and where individuals sign up. Just to give some context, we mostly work with organizations for their employee base. So overnight shift working populations is our main target customer. But at the individual level, we offer, our main product offering are these what we call comprehensive sleep health programs. There's one without a coach and then one with a coach. And each of the programs are about 8 weeks in duration. They include learning materials, tracking and analytics to measure progress, sleep health products. So we ship out kits, so sleep health kits of evidence-based and safe, effective tools to change someone's sleep environment. And then a premium option allows someone to work with a sleep, essentially expert. So we work with PhDs who are trained in sleep behavioral medicine to basically build a personalized approach to solving whatever sleep need is going on. We will screen for things like sleep apnea or insomnia, and then work with them on a one-on-one basis to solve that over those 8 weeks. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell, not to belabor that point. But today we're working, I'd like to look at a feature that we're building around the analytics of tracking sleep. And so I've just got sort of my local host pulled up in our local code base, looking at this. And there's all these sort of different sort of sections within the app where they each add sort of different components and functionality to the user experience. So this is my Somni is sort of like a generalized dashboard. How to Sleep is where we all the sort of thematic lessons live. So we have these content packs that are just sort of like, this is again a testing account, so it's very empty, but I could probably pull it up on production actually. But they are essentially to teach people, basically take them step by step through how to sleep better. And this gets sort of sent to them, ping them on a frequency that they like, either email or text, and they're short lessons that they can either read or listen to. I'm gonna just actually sign in really quick just so I can show production grade stuff, or what's live. And yeah, so back to these content packs, they are they can either be listened to or read, and they're all sort of themed. We have different sort of all these different topics and whatnot. And then there's a product store, so you can order products in addition to the kit you get if you want to reorder things, and then from our sleep health kits. And then you can also work with a coach. So this is where you can message with a coach, and this sort of has omni-channel support with Twilio and just allows them to sort of interact. But a big piece of this all working with the coach is that the sleep data it's important to track someone's progress over time, to see if they're getting better or worse, and so they can leave notes and things like that. So right now we're sort of overhauling this feature. And so just to pull this up, right now we're trying to we're hooking in with an API called Terra, which basically it's like a one-stop shop for all the wearables that are in existence. They sort of wrangle all the different APIs like Garmin's and Apple Watches and Fitbits and make it somewhat standardized and orderly, if you will. And then we're basically tying in with that so that we can allow a user to connect any one of their wearables and send that data up to us. And so instead of managing those connections one-on-one that we were doing previously, we're just switching over to this API. And we've got this plumbed out and working, but it's still fairly rough in terms of some like edges and niceties, and it's just sort of working just enough. And so I just would love to look at it today and kind of open the kimono and just see what we could be doing better and how we could think about it more intelligently, since I'm sure there's a lot of really smart people on this call and would love to just get some ideas. So I will stop there.
Okay. Now I'll share my screen now and we can look at some code. Okay. There we go. And let me know when you guys can see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay. Okay. So Matt, we have this controller, we have sleep datum, another controller, Terra controller, and Terra record, or Terra record. Any one of these you want me to start with, Matt?
Yeah, just to give some context here, I think it might be helpful to talk about the history here a little bit, just to explain it. The sleep datum model was originally the thing that we wrote for just logging sleep data on a nightly basis. You could go in and just manually enter a log. You could enter, how well you slept, when you went to bed, when you woke up, sort of very sort of basic way to have a form and enter that. And then that is graphed in the app. And that was what the original sort of V1 of just getting functionality working to kind of track that and expose that to the coaches so they could see what was going on. And then from there, we added Terra controller, and Terra records came later. So try Terra is as the name of the API, or Terra is the name of the API, if you will. And so that came later on. And basically what we attempted to do was take the data that comes in from when we listen, we have an endpoint, a webhook that we listen for the Tri-Terra API for their payloads, and we can set that up. We can look at that more specifically. I don't think I might have included some of that, but if not, I can share my screen. But essentially, we just listen for that, and when the data comes in, we essentially parse it a bit and look for certain things. We throw out a lot of it because we actually are only interested in the sleep data, and Tri-Terra throws us lots of records that we don't need. For example, it throws us lots of fitness records and things of that nature, or activity records, or things that don't contain sleep data, for example. And so we actually sort of right at the endpoint we're listening for, we scrap a lot of that and listen for the stuff that we care about. So I don't really know exactly where best would be to start, but I think we could really jump in anywhere. But I think the Tri-Terra record is the newest and probably maybe the most fragile still, because it hasn't sort of been tested thoroughly yet with a lot of users. So
okay. Well, if it sounds okay, maybe I'll start in sleep datum, because this is one of the meatier files. So this is maybe there's some substance here to go off of.
Sure, that sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing I notice is just the size of the file. It's relatively large, and if I kind of take a walk through it like this, I see kind of a lopsidedness. There is this one method that's obviously quite large, and then these other ones that are small. And so that makes me wonder, what is this big method all about? And then when I look at these smaller methods, I wonder kind of how they're clustered. Because what I'm seeking when I open this file is I'm seeking to get a quick understanding of the overall idea of this model and what it represents and what it does. And so if we can facilitate that, then that's obviously good. So I'm gonna start here because this is kind of where that large method ends and these smaller methods start. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna read aloud each of these method names to myself and just start to get a feel for everything. Sleep time, nap count, bedtime delta, and I'll also make maybe a comment or two. Sleep time, that I can imagine what that might be. Nap count, same thing. Bedtime delta, less sure. Set default sleep wake, I can kind of guess what that might be. Formatted wake time, formatted bedtime, okay. A lot of formatting related stuff. Okay. Yeah, so one thing, Matt, that I can see as relatively low-hanging fruit for improvement here is there are kind of clusters around formatting. And that tells me that maybe these formatting related things can be moved somewhere else, whether that be a helper, view component, anything like that. That can make it so these kind of formatting related details don't have to distract us in this file from the main point.
Yeah, that's so that would be, how would you maybe set that up then? What would you just pull all that out and stitch that into a helper? Is that what you're thinking? Or
It's a great question. I have no opinion yet. Let's maybe grab one specifically. Okay, formatted wake time. So that for me, that decision would depend a lot on where this comes out. And obviously I don't have the complete code base on my computer, so I can't go to where this comes out, but I assume there's one or more templates where this is used.
yeah, there's that's used in so I guess maybe to give some context here, and this is actually maybe another question to maybe get some direction on, is dealing with time zones. And so I know this is sort of, I don't have tons of experience in this realm other than kind of quickly synthesizing what's been done best practice. Because one of the issues we deal with is a lot of these individuals are traveling around the world in their different time zones. So their wearables are actually moving through time zones. And most of the times the devices catch that. And so, but sometimes they don't. And it's just, that's like a problem for the API to deal with. But on our end, we're actually trying to think about what's the best practice to kind of store all the time data and then pull it out. And my cursory understanding is it's best to log everything in UTC and then display it in the user's requested time zone. And a lot of these formatting sort of decisions are around exactly that. So just trying to take that and make the data kind of look pretty for the user. And yeah, so if anyone has any comments on how to deal with time zones, would love to hear it. Any strong opinions, would love to hear it. And then also, I think the other thing that's interesting is allowing a user to go in and manually update a record so that if the device misses the time zone they were in because of an error with the device, traveling, say, back from Paris, if you will, and your device just doesn't update or sync with the time zone, then you could actually in the record easily go and do that without creating too much brain damage. So anyways, that's a tangent.
Okay, but maybe let's dwell on that for a second and talk about that. So what you described sounds good so far, storing everything in UTC, and then when it comes out, display it however you want to display it then. Question for you is, what's wrong with how you're doing it now? Are you totally happy with how you're doing it now? Or do you have any pain points around the way you're doing it now?
The only pain point is that when the records get fudged because the device doesn't capture the time zone. And so a user will say like, oh, this is 2 hours off. And it's the only reason it's 2 hours off because the device missed the sync for whatever reason. And it's not really clear to me. Each device has their own sort of peculiarities. So I think having some way for a user to see like they're viewing a very sort of explicit way to know what time zone they're viewing in, like their data, what it was logged in, and then ability to change that. So I think that might just be more a function of like a quick form field that I add to the record where you can kind of quickly adjust it, I think. But that would be my one current pain point with it. Otherwise, it seems to be working as expected, so long as the device catches the time zone appropriately.
Yeah, right now for each time that's captured, do you have maybe not only the time, but the time zone that you believe the user was in at the time that time was captured?
We do. We get that time zone data, that differential from UTC. So we get that data in the payload. The thing is, though, that can be wrong. So the originated data can be wrong. And so a way just for a user to kind of go back in and toggle that to say it was like, instead of -7, it was -9 or something,
Okay.
But that might just be
Okay.
a UI thing, I think. Now that
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything more to that than just like the grunt work of building that feature to let them change? Because there's like grunt work, and then there's like mysteries that need to be solved. Trying to get a feel for how much of those there are.
I think that might be more grunt work actually, now that you say it, and just talking about it feels like fairly straightforward. I think maybe more I'm just a little bit shoddy or shaky on just the time zone approach. Are we thinking about it right in terms of in UTC, out local time, or is there a better way to do that?
Everything we've talked about so far sounds like how I would do it. Nothing we've talked about has raised any red flags or anything like that for me.
Okay. Well then, yeah, that was maybe my biggest question. So yeah, maybe if you want to just keep going with what you were thinking on the
Okay.
Sorry about for the derailment.
Oh no, don't be sorry. Okay, so yeah, for something like this, okay, so in order to understand what would be good, maybe let's talk a little bit more about what the costs are of this. And so I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as we go. Ben says, sorry, I'm late. Can anyone type a super short summary of this app and what it does? I'll just say that it helps. Well, Matt, you can probably say it a lot better than me, but it helps people with their sleeping. That's my one sentence summary. But Matt, do you mind just giving a super quick summary for Ben?
Yeah, sure. Where it's basically a structured 8-week intervention for helping someone sleep better. It adapts to sort of their lifestyle and their needs. We use education, products, analytics, coaching, and we're working on some analytic issue feature that we're dealing with around tracking their sleep using a external API.
Okay. So the cost of having things like this is you have this class, which is maybe somewhat general.
Mhm.
And then inside it, you have these methods that are very specific. I talk about the essential versus the incidental. And we want to forefront the essential points and hide the incidental details. And as far as like the essential points to incidental details spectrum, this is about as incidental as it gets, this kind of formatting stuff.
Okay.
So if this is only used in like one place, I wouldn't have a huge problem with just putting this in line in the template even.
Okay.
Another thing I might reach for is a view component, as I said before, but I'm really not sure. I'm hesitant to give a prescription for this. I think I would like try a few things out and see how they feel. So I'm hesitant to pick one thing and say like I would definitely do that because I'm really not sure.
Okay.
What I can say for sure is I would try to get this somewhere else. Okay.
Because it's on the very sort of granular side of what should be in a model. Am I hearing you right?
Yes. Yeah, like with respect to this model, like some models are like very fine-grained ideas, and so it's natural for them to contain fine-grained things. But I think this model is more of a fundamental model, and so to have this incidental of a detail feels inappropriate to the scale of it.
Okay. Actually a really, maybe this could be like a quick side
Yeah.
pocket. Could you maybe explain how you think about like everything you've seen, sort of best practice for how to think about what to stick in the model? I know this is sort of, there's some sort of, I don't know, loose ideas around this that are sort of barely talked about, but I'm just curious. I don't know if I've ever heard you share your philosophy behind it. I'm just curious, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have talked about this a bit before, and I'll refrain from giving the entire lecture over again for anybody who's heard it before. But there's, Matt, if you look at my videos and look for one that's called like a different way to think about Rails models, that's one where I talk about that a bit. And then I have some blog posts on the same topic, but I'll share some of that right now. So a lot of Rails developers, including myself when I first started, they think of a model as something being like very tightly related to the database tables. Like if I have 14 database tables in my application, I'll have 14 models as well. But I think of a model more broadly. Like a model is just anything that's like, anything that's like a useful approximation to the truth. And people even use models outside of programming, like scientists use models and mathematicians use models and stuff like that. And so I think of a model more broadly. So I don't see any reason why a model needs to have a connection to a database table. And so I express the vast majority of my application's code in models. I don't really use service objects and stuff like that. Very occasionally I do, but not as my go-to way of structuring things. I put almost everything in the model. But then as far as what do you put in any particular model, I actually put things, so like the active record models are like the last place I want to put something, because the active record models are very easy to get cluttered. They tend to be kind of a dumping ground for just anything that's related to that model. And so I really only want to put something in there if it's closely related to it, and everything else, I'm either going to create more fine-grained models that this model delegates to, or if it's a view related thing like we've talked about, I'll put it in the template or a view component, something like that.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Small comment. I would try to figure out a way to dry this part up.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how I would do that, but one inclination I would have is maybe putting something in the application config file that says like, this is kind of the format we like to use for our times in this app, and put that one time in the config rather than repeating it in these places.
Okay.
And then just same story with all this other stuff. I would put that somewhere in view related code. And as I'm talking and thinking about this more and more, I think I would lean more toward view components, because view components for me are a good place to, it's a way to give a home to this code that really doesn't have a home anywhere else. So I'm not saying that's like the right answer, but I'm saying that's something that's definitely something I was trying to consider.
Okay. I'll look into that. It's helpful.
Question about that is the front end using Rails also, or is it using another JavaScript framework?
We're using Rails. We're trying to use as little JavaScript as possible. There's a few places we touch it, but I've tried to stay away from it mostly, just to simplify my life.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question for you, Matt. What is a sleep datum? Obviously, datum is singular of data, so I can kind of imagine what sleep data might be, and I can vaguely imagine what a sleep datum might be, but can you give me a better idea of what that is?
Yeah. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. The sleep datum is, so like the individual record is basically like trying to catalog a night. So what it includes some just the basic ideas of trying to capture, all the things that happen when you sleep. So when you went to bed, when you woke up, what was the quality of the sleep? What was, that's on a 1 to 5 scale. And then did you nap at all? And was it the duration of the nap? So just trying to get, that's like, and basically any 24-hour cycle, you're just trying to get all the touch points of your sleep essentially. And then, yeah, I think that kind of, if that answers your question, that's what sort of an individual record is intended to do, at least. So,
Okay. And is sleep datum like a term of art, or is this something that was invented for this app?
we just wrote it for this app because, we knew we needed just a way to, yeah, we knew we were going to need to track people's sleep to just see if they were getting better or not. One of the things we try to do in all of our interventions is, collect evidence that we're working or not. And so I think originally that was a big part of the thinking, was just something to track that idea on a 24-hour cycle. So,
Okay.
and what's
Yeah.
also, I
Uh-huh.
should add, is unique to what we do. We work a lot with shift workers, so they don't have normal
Right.
schedules, and then we work a lot with varying time zones around the world. And so there's just sort of this. The idea is more broad in the sense of when you think about like sleep, most people think, oh, I go to bed at 10 and I wake up at 8 or what have you. But it's we think about it differently. We think about it just on a 24-hour cycle. What are the points and times that you're sleeping? The largest chunk being like what we call sleep, but that doesn't necessarily occur at night. It can occur sort of anytime during the day. For example, you're a third shift, ER surgeon, or you're working on an oil rig, or you're a pilot, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, side note, that's something I've actually thought about a lot for some reason, is like pilots and sleeping. Like that must just be like a nightmare for your sleep schedule.
Oh yeah, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, and it's compounded by the fact that when you fly through time zones around the world, so it's like it gets really complicated really fast. Circadian disruption is like a known carcinogen,
Mm,
and it gets even more challenging when you're just inconsistent.
yeah.
So that's another conversation, but anyways, yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. So I'm not saying that I necessarily think sleep datum is anything but a perfectly fine name. For all I know, it is. But I just habitually scrutinize everything. Because especially with names of, I gather that this is a pretty fundamental model in the application. So like the more fundamental the model is, the more scrutiny on the name of that model I feel like is justified. So, you know, not knowing the things that you just described, I would see this and think like, oh, I should call this night of sleep or something like that. But obviously that's not fitting because it's not necessarily a night. But based on what you just said, I would think maybe should we call this a sleep cycle or cycle period or something like that? Is there something that could be more blatantly obvious to an unfamiliar programmer than sleep datum when they look at this? Because I would not have guessed that the meaning of sleep datum is what you said it was. But I'm not sure there's a better name, but I at least wanted to plant that idea in your mind.
That's a great point. I mean, quite frankly, dealing with like the plural and the singular of sleep data, sleep datum in your head when you're writing gets a little bit like murky very quickly because it's just a sleep datum. Anyways, so yeah, I'm definitely open to it. If anyone's got good ideas, would love to hear it.
Okay. Oh yeah, or like a cycle record. Like it's not record as in database record, but like record of that period of sleeping. Sleep interval. Yeah, maybe that's good. And just catching up on the chat, Ben said, so aren't those methods good candidates for scopes? I would guess that wouldn't get it out of the model. Well, to me, scopes are something that like kind of filters a list of database records, and this is something different happening with these. These are just like a single value getting formatted. So I don't think I would use a scope for that. I want to focus now, Matt, on this get dashboard data method, because there's a lot here, and I'm sure that there's room for improvement there. But first, I want to gain a little bit of an understanding how the stuff that's returned by this method is used in the UI.
Yeah, and I will try to answer it the best I can. This part of it has been a bit, and I did not write this part. I focused mostly on the Tritera controller and record, but I think I can try and walk through it. But essentially, the get dashboard data is on the dashboard. We try and show a user the last 10 nights of their sleep in a sort of simplified graph. Sort of, you might think of it like a histogram of each night. I'm happy to share with you what it looks like if you want, but look at the view. But essentially, it's just trying to look at each night in a very simplistic way. When did you go to bed? When did you wake up? And what was the quality as indicated by like a color scale? Just a very sort of rudimentary starting point. And that's kind of what it is trying to do. I am aware that this method is very unwieldy and probably very sloppy, quite frankly, not very elegant. And so I would very, very happy to try and improve it tonight.
Okay. My first thought is the name. Whenever I see anything that's called data, I'm immediately skeptical, because data is about the broadest word you could use beside thing or stuff. And so I think maybe there's probably room for improvement there. And I'll say this also, like in general with naming, sometimes if there's a name that's not as good as it could be, sometimes the problem is that the person hasn't recognized what the thing really is and thought deeply about recognizing that thing. But sometimes the problem is downstream of maybe some muddy thinking, maybe this is called data because it has to be called data, because that's the only thing you could call all this stuff. But maybe this whole thing could be conceived in a different way, where it's not data, but there are a number of smaller, more specific things. I don't feel like I explained that as well as I wanted to, but hopefully at least part of that made some amount of sense. If I were refactoring this, here's the first thing I would do. So this method here, it feels like something very specific. Going back to the essential and the incidental, it seems like something that's not an essential point when it comes to sleep datum. But I don't know what it is. So here's what I might do first. I might just move it to a different place. I'm going to call it, for now, I'll just call it dashboard. So I'm going to create a class called dashboard. And usually when I do these kind of things, I don't worry about getting a good name right off the bat, because I know right now is the point in time when I know the least about this whole thing. And after I work with it a little bit, I'll probably understand it better and probably be able to think of a better name. So I'll just call it dashboard right now, even though I probably won't stick with that. And I'm just going to take this entire chunk and move it into this dashboard class. And then here I would call dashboard .new user dot data. I'm just making stuff up. The main thing I want to achieve here is, again, highlighting the incidental and highlighting the essential and hiding the incidental. So this takes that big chunk of code and gets it out of here at least. And then here I decided to call this method data. Again, I may well change that to something else, but I just wanted to get this moved out of there for right now. Initialize, give it a user. Okay. And then obviously I would have to go and change each instance of user to @user. I don't know how many times. Oh, just appears this once, so that's fine. And by the way,
So-
oh yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, when you're this might be a silly question. When you're initializing user, calling @user there, here versus in the sleep data model, why can you unpack like this? Maybe I'm not connecting the dots here.
Oh, sure. And I realized I made a mistake there. Okay. So I just want to get this chunk of code out of the sleep datum file, because if this is here, then I find it distracting.
Mhm.
And so I want to get the distraction out. So this achieves that.
Yep.
And then just mechanically, in order for that to happen, I see that a user is needed.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I'm giving this class this this user member, just because I see that it's needed here on this line. I don't know if
Okay.
that answers your question or not.
It does. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Oh, somebody saying something in the chat. And so dashboard would become a Poro living in models. Yes, Ben, exactly.
Cool.
Okay. So now I would take a look at the innards of this and see, what do I think? Are there some ways to break it up? And there's multiple concerns in this little project of refactoring this. There's the concern of how do I want it to look? But there's also the concern of making the change in a safe way. So another part of the reason why I did what I did and the way I did it was because putting this in a new class without touching the contents at all is a relatively safe action. So if there's maybe not a lot of test coverage in this area, I would feel decent about making this change without having that test coverage there. And I would do this, I would commit it, I would manually test what I thought was relevant. I would deploy just that change by itself. I would wait a period of time and see if anything, any bugs arose or anything like that. And that's how I would go about that. I just want to mention that because some of the things I'm about to do, I'm going to change some code like crazy. That's not the way that I would really go about that in production. I would do it much more cautiously. But obviously right now, that's not the whole point. Right now, I just want to illustrate how this code might be changed.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just in these places where I see spacing issues that distract me a little bit, I'm going to address those. These might seem like trivialities, but to me, it actually helps a lot to take these things. You know, I read this design book once and it had this rule in it that said things that are grouped together are perceived as belonging together. And so I try to group my code in that kind of way. And when I see like a conditional butted right up against other lines like this, for some reason that makes it hard for me to understand it. So I like to have those blank lines in between. I'll take out this double blank. Okay. And I often don't try to understand it from the beginning. I don't start at the beginning. I usually start at the end, actually. Okay. And I see that what is returned is this thing called sleep data. And right before we return it, we're doing all these assignments. Not sure what that's about yet. And I also see that these assignments are happening inside of something. So I'm going to go see what that is. Okay, if surveys.size is greater than 0, then we do all this stuff. And otherwise we don't. Okay. And surveys is sleep datum Okay, we're getting the sleep data for this user. Okay, and interesting. For some reason, a collection of sleep data is being called a survey. Any idea why that is, Matt?
I don't know what the original decision was behind that, but I think it might just be something around the, like, the thinking of like, it's like an individual sleep. I don't have a great answer. My speculation might be is that just a nomenclature decision around you're surveying or asking someone like how they slept that night, perhaps, and just trying to capture that. And it was just a stub in. That's my best attempt to understand. It's been a bit, so.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to do something tentative. I'm gonna take the liberty of renaming sleep datum to sleep interval.
Okay.
Somebody suggested that, and I think I like that.
I do too.
And then, oh, I see surveys only appears 3 times, so that's easy to rename. So I'm going to call this sleep intervals. And I find that often if I take a piece of code, a confusing piece of code, and just do nothing more than change some variables, quite often it's like night and day understandability wise. Okay. So if there are multiple, no, if there are any sleep intervals, I can actually do this. If there are any sleep intervals, then we do this stuff. Otherwise, we don't do any of that stuff and we just return the sleep data. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if sleep intervals, what's the opposite of any? Is it, do I say blank?
Blank or empty.
Okay, I'll say empty.
I don't know if that's true of collections though. It may just be an empty array.
We'll pretend it works. If sleep intervals dot empty, we return sleep data. Turn sleep data. There's something in the chat here. Is there best practice for mapping assignments? Should it be its own mapper object? I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one for now, Ben. I don't know enough about that area of the code to make any comment on that. Okay. So instead of saying if sleep intervals that any do all this stuff and otherwise don't do it and just return sleep data, I'm going to say if sleep intervals is empty, then immediately return sleep data. And I'm going to kill this conditional. And I'm going to unindent all this stuff. Because the more nesting you have with your conditionals and stuff like that, the harder things are to understand. And if anybody's not familiar, this is called a guard clause because it kind of guards against this condition. And if this condition is met, then it just boots you out. Okay, so if there are no sleep intervals, we just stop right there. Okay, and if there are some, then we do all this stuff. And I think I'm going to go about 10 more minutes or so, just so everybody knows. We cycle through the sleep intervals and we do some certain things, okay. And then we do some more. Okay. So what I'm thinking to myself now is whether there's any way we can break up all this code into separate methods or something like that. Just because, again, a big chunk of code like this is harder to understand than smaller pieces of code. And so I'm going to try to understand what's going on here. Okay, here's an opportunity. Sleep intervals each do S. So S is not as easy to understand as sleep interval. So anywhere I see S, I'm going to rename it to sleep interval. Oops. I guess I could search for S dot. Oh, that's not what I want. Okay. Did I make a mistake? No. Okay. 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 So that helps a little bit. If sleep interval dot wake time dot present and bedtime present. Okay. And what does that mean? If there's a wake time and a sleep time. Matt, any insight on that?
Yeah. So like for each record in a 24-hour cycle, we like log, sleep bedtime is when you go to bed and wake time is when you wake up.
Mhm.
And those can, for example, a record that's not been filled out won't have those. So they're just, they won't be there. It'll just be, empty. And so I think right, this might be getting at is saying like in that sleep record or the sleep interval, excuse me, if the wake time is present and the bedtime is present, then kind of work through some next bit of logic or processing.
Okay. And what I was after was kind of the meaning of the wake time and bedtime being present. Under what conditions would those not be present? Was that just a day they missed, or I
Yeah,
mean,
so that's a
conceivably?
good question. That's a really good question. Yeah, so like records can be like, space it, for example, you don't link a wearable and you're just manually logging your sleep for the 8 weeks. Like you'll
Mhm.
likely miss some days given the nature of human beings.
Mhm.
And so like some records can be empty, for example. But if you enter any sort of, I guess you could in theory save a record and just put a bedtime, like a bedtime, but not a wake time. So I suppose, you could just do one or the other in the form, and I can show you what that form looks like if you want. But I wonder maybe that's what it's trying to prevent is make sure both are entered in the record so that you can have both of them, perhaps.
Okay. Okay, I think that tells me what I wanted to know. So here's one. I'll do a couple things to try to make this easier to understand. So one, I mentioned how nesting can make things harder to understand. So I'm gonna try to kill one level of nesting here, and the way I'm gonna do that is this. I'm gonna say sleep intervals dot select, and I'm gonna say, I'm going to give it this Boolean of wake time present and bedtime present that each do sleep interval. And then I'm going to take all this and unindent it and go like that. Okay. So I'll pause a second there. Matt, are you familiar with how select works?
I am loosely without having it in front of me, but if maybe you could run through it again. But I'm fairly I've worked with it before, just don't have it top of mind.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea is rather than cycling through this list of things and performing a check every single iteration, instead, you just filter the entire list and then you do whatever you're going to do with the remaining items.
Okay.
So again, instead of going through all the sleep intervals one by one and checking every single time, is the wake time present for this one? Is the wake time present for this one? Instead, at the beginning, we just go through them all and we say only keep the ones where the wake time and the bedtime are present.
Got it. And then take the remainder of the list and do whatever you want to do with the records.
Yeah. And I find that easier to understand. And I'm even going to do something else. I'm going to say sleep interval. I'm not sure if I like this yet, but I'm going to try this. So we can imagine a method called complete or something like that. Or we could even express it a different way. We could do this, reject, and say incomplete. So just the opposite of selecting the complete ones, we reject the incomplete ones. I feel like it might be unclear what it means for the sleep interval to be complete, but maybe it's a little easier to imagine what it might be, what it might mean for it to be incomplete. Or maybe we even decide that this is the most clear. I'm not sure.
Is incomplete going through and saying if each of the fields in the model is not answered, then it's false essentially?
Well, I was just making stuff up. So
Oh.
what I would have done is just taken this line here and I would have made a new method. Whoops. I would have made a new method called like sleep interval. Complete. And it's defined like this. Yeah, that's all I was getting at there.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Where was I?
You could also extract the whole select block and
Mhm.
create a new function called completed sleep intervals, and it returns a an array of completed intervals. And then in the second block, you could iterate over those.
Oh yeah, I might like that too. Carl said something in the chat. Tangential proposal. What if we renamed sleep data to sleep dashboard summary? My intuition is sleep data is the hash that is used by the dashboard view Ben showed us. Or maybe meant that Matt showed us. But yeah, that might be a nice idea. So sleep data. Oh, I see. So we rename that sleep data to sleep dashboard. Whoops. Summary. Okay. And that's, just one little thing that makes it 5% easier to understand, but all these little things add up. So it's about time to start wrapping up. And obviously we only got a little ways into this. I think what I would characterize most of this as is just identifying names that maybe aren't as closely representative of the concepts that they represent as they could be, trying to identify those and to think of clearer names. That was a big part of what we did. And then again, I think one of the ideas that we talked about a lot was forefronting the essential and backgrounding the incidental. And that was the motivation for taking the contents of this method and making this new class out of it. So we could move it from here to here. I'm going to catch up on the chat here too. Oh yeah. Thanks, Ben. Okay. Well, that is all I have for my end, Matt. Any closing comments from you or anything like that? Any questions or anything like that too?
No, super helpful. I took a bunch of notes. Thank you for pulling this apart and giving it attention and time. Really interesting. One question, this is not sort of related to this exercise in itself, but just one or two books you might recommend that sort of influenced your thinking on maybe just working with Rails in general that have been really, or programming. Just curious to maybe wrap up with that.
Yeah, the number one that comes to mind for me is Martin Fowler's Refactoring.
Mhm.
And I bet you could even do this. I bet you could take refactoring because it's kind of a bag of tricks. there's like 100 different refactoring techniques. And I bet you could just sit in front of the computer with that book and leaf through that book and look, for example, this code. Yeah, there you go. Carl has it. And I bet you could come across the refactoring techniques and be like, oh, extract method, I can use that here. And you could go through that. And then once you're all the way through, I bet you could start over at the beginning of the book with the same piece of code. And now that you're a little more educated in the ways of refactoring, you can identify even more opportunities on the second pass. So just that one book right there would give you a lot of bang for your buck, I think.
Very cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will snag that one. Definitely been recommended before. I'll grab it now though. Thank you.
Yeah, nice. Okay. There is some more in the chat, so I'm going to check that real quick. Carl says 99 bottles of OOP.
Of what you said, that book is amazing, and it's great in combination with static analysis tools like Reek or something that will go through your code base and suggest areas of improvement, because it will say like, oh, here, this place you could use the extract method, or there are different things that come straight, the concepts that come straight out of the book that you could automate with a static analysis tool in terms of like finding areas in your code for improvement.
Okay. Very, very cool. You said Rake was one of the tools you recommended?
I think it's Reek.
Yeah, Reek.
Reek.
I think REAK.
Yeah, like it
Like
detects
smells,
code
or
smells.
REEK. Yeah, yeah.
Got it. Reek. Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, stench was already taken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's Ben said 99 bottles of OP is pretty fantastic. So, and it's closer to a fun read than most of the other books. Much easier to read than refactoring.
Okay, I'll get that one too. Is it on books? Is there anybody else got just must-haves on the shelves now that we're on it?
Well, Carl mentioned Pooter, Practical Object-Oriented Design in Ruby by Sandy Metz.
Yeah.
It's another very popular one.
Yeah.
Oh, Code Complete.
Mm.
That's a great one, Matt. That's a strong recommendation from me. That book is really good.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, among those, that'll keep you busy for quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. This was awesome. Appreciate you willing to again give attention and time and energy to this, and everyone else on the call. Thanks for everyone's input. Found this helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing your code here and letting us look at it. It gives me something to work with. It's really helpful. So thanks, Matt. Thanks everybody for coming, and I will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.